The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. After a great weekend of Premiership rugby, it's almost time for the Six Nations to kick off. And with me to discuss everything you need to know ahead of this weekend, it's the Evening Standard's Steve Cording. Steve, how are you?
I'm better now, Lowell. I had a touch of man flu last week, which actually was a double-edged sword. It actually meant that I got to watch quite a bit of cricket, which was, I have to say, how fantastic was that yesterday? Congratulations to England beating India, which is give us all a fillip.
We know you media types, you creative in that creative industry, you have, man flu and tissue meetings and all those sorts of things. We have our special guest this week, an old friend. No, he's actually a friend, but he's also an old friend of the podcast. It's Ben Kay. Benny, how are you?
I'm good. Good to be back, Lawrence.
Yeah, you're one of the founder members, aren't you, Ben?
Yeah.
Remember? Memory? Back in the days when we were working with Will McPherson and his lovely hair.
Absolutely, yeah.
Indeed. Hot-footed up from King's Home, where you were working very hard. I always feel, of all of our crew on TNT, that you work the hardest. Am I allowed to say that?
Oh, it's very kind of you, Lawrence. I'm not sure you can call it work, but yeah, I'll turn up, that's for sure.
Shall we talk about our favourite time of the year then, the Six Nations, as it's a bit chilly and a bit cold during January when it starts, and then obviously by the time we finished in March, we're looking forward to spring and a bit of summer, so I think it definitely is our favourite time of the year, isn't it? Anyway, we are working with our partners QBE Business Insurance throughout the Six Nations. They've produced a predictor which, believe it or not, simulates the tournament 10,000 times, producing the outcome for 150,000 games. So I've got in front of me the results for the first round, which are being forecast by QBE, which is as follows. France, 25, Ireland, 26, Italy, 11, England, 39, Wales 15, Scotland 23. So should we start with the game that both of you are going to in Rome, Italy against England? I'd quite like both of you actually to pick your starting 15s for England for this weekend, because there are a few conundrums. So if we take it position by position, who would you have in the front row? Ben, you go first.
So obviously, this is a lot of the unexpected stuff, and the doubt is around post World Cup. When does Steve Borthwick start looking to the future a little bit? But he also needs to cement this place, and I think Ellis Genge will definitely start at the loose head. I think obviously Jamie George will start at hooker because he's captain, so it'd be very strange to make him captain and then not pick him, but I think he's out and out.
Not pick him.
Yeah. One of the reasons he's being picked is because I think he's so secure of his place. And then if you look at what he did in the World Cup, he tended to try and get a bit of balance of players. So if you've got someone like Ellis Genge that you want to be running around the field, you probably want a fairly strong scrummager in there. So I think Hayes will get his time, but I'm just wondering, and what throws this selection out a little bit is because it's Italy, and would it be seen that you might go in with a slightly different side if Italy was later on in the tournament, but you want a big start. So I think he might go with Dan Cole, believe it or not.
Yeah, and I think for me, let's just remind our listeners that England have lost more games in the last few Six Nations championships than they've won.
Last three,
yeah,
isn't
the last
it?
three. So
yeah.
I mean, in the words of one captain that I knew once, we're slightly overdrawn at the moment, and we need to get ourselves back in credit. And this is a game where clearly I think you do need to bring in certain players, because if you're bringing in uncapped players into a tournament, at what point do you play them? Well, you play them really in a game where they're probably going to feel a bit more comfortable, and that might be the opening game. But I'm inclined to agree with Ben. This is not the team that Steve Borthwick's going to pick. This is the team that I would pick. I don't know how much game time Ellis Genge has had since the World Cup. Players, when we were playing, you'd almost be put on the bench if you haven't had enough game time. But the return to play protocols are a bit different now. They seem to be able to go from having a long-term injury straight into the starting 15 because the training has been adapted so significantly. So there's every chance if he's fit and ready to go, I would pick Ellis Genge. But if he's not, I mean, I'm still a big Joe Marler fan, and would definitely have him in the team with Ellis off the bench. I think the captain is the captain and should have been captain about 3 or 4 years ago, if I'm honest. Great that he's captain now, and that's nothing against Owen Farrell. I just think it's a great appointment because Jamie's one of those few players that's not only got the respect of his own teammates, he's one of those captains that actually the opposition would admire and respect as well, and not use as a way of motivating themselves anymore against England. And I had Dan Cole, absolutely. I think he's still, even at 36, got a huge part to play in this England team as we transition across to whatever team we're going to have in a couple of years' time. So no disagreements there. Second row wise, I'll kick off. I mean, Maritoji, thankfully, has hit the form that we know he's capable of. I think his role within this squad and this team, not only as a player but as a leader, is going to be huge over the next few years. And I think Benny's area of specialism. We've got some injuries, obviously across the whole second row. But if Ollie Chesson comes through his head knock, whilst he's a contender at 6, and probably I'd prefer to see him there more often. I think he's needs must at the minute, and I think they'll pack down in the second row.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you
with
agree,
that.
Benny?
Yeah, absolutely. I think had George Martin been fit, that conversation about the whole back five makeup would have been very, very different. And I think we might have seen all 3 of them starting. But with George Martin out, there's no doubt for me that it's Chesham and Itoje.
Personally, this is probably the hardest back row dilemma, really, because England have got 1 or 2 injuries. Obviously, you've got players that have moved on. You've got players that haven't been selected. You've got players like Jack Willis who can't be selected. So it's a tricky one. For me, I think we have to have a look at Tom Pearson. We have to see him in an international jersey. I do think that we need to get some size into our team in terms of the back row. And if you look at South Africa and France, what sets them apart is the sheer size that they have. And I do think this young man is an intelligent football player. I think he's got enough in his game to not just be, a handful of caps. I think he could be around for a very long time. So I'd like to see him in there. I think Ben Earl deserves to be there, given what he's done. And I guess for me, in a game like this, I'd like to see Sam Underhill in there as well. But I know people will be saying, well, why not Alex Dombrandt? Why have you not picked him? I don't know. I mean, I think that he will get game time in this championship. And I think it's a massive championship for him because coaches have to trust players. And I'm not sure I'm not sure Alex Dombrandt's quite performed at England to get the trust of Steve Borthwick yet. And I think if he doesn't in this championship, then I think that patience will run out. So it's a big championship for him. But I think I'd go with those 3. But it could be Benny will probably pick another 3. I don't know.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which are your 3?
Well, look,
yeah.
as we all know, the back row, probably more than any other unit, is all about balance. And we look at that list of players and we go, Dombrandt's playing fantastically well. Ben Earl was amazing at the World Cup. Tom Pearson's playing fantastically well. But they all do quite a similar role for their team. And I think he's going to want a bit of grunt in there as well. I mentioned that I think that had Martin been fit, we might have seen one of the locks at 6. But I think if he wants to put Ben Earl in the team and uses pace from the base of the scrum, which we've seen him done before, you're a bit sort of hampered by what all that balance of positions, where they've been playing for their club, where they've had success at for England level. But I think Ben Earl might start at 8, in which case you might be looking at someone that's a decent line-out option, so Ben Earl can go and stand in the back line for the shortened line-outs, but also the heavyweight carrier in the close quarters, and I think he might look at Ethan Roots from Exeter. So that would give you, a tall option for the line out, but a physical, hard player. And then, I totally agree. You then need a 7 that's a good jackler, good tackler, and I would have no problem if it was Sam Underhill, but I'd love to have a look at Ben Curry if available. So I think he has been sensational for Sale. Obviously, been in his twin brother's shadow a fair bit. A bit more of an attacking option than Tom. Maybe not quite as effective over the ball as Tom, but I think that's a really nice balanced back row.
It's a good job you two aren't England selectors. We'd never get a team picked, would we?
Well, they must do this. The coaches must do this, right?
Yeah, they would
spend hours. You would think. Yeah. Do you want to move? Should we move on to 9 and 10? Because I know that fly half last week, Lol, we spoke about Finn versus Marcus. Which side are you going to come down on for 9 and 10 to start in Italy?
Well, I mean, listen, we've got some great options in all positions, really. In those positions, I think there is, Alex Mitchell has obviously been playing out of his skin, and amazing to think that however many months ago it was that he wasn't even in the England squad, and he's parachuted into the World Cup, and suddenly where he is now, really, really good. I think Ben Spencer, warrants his selection and gives England a really different way of playing. I can't believe that he was flown out to Japan, for that World Cup final, arrived the week of the final that Benny and I were commentating, and then we haven't seen him since. Really, it's crazy to think
6 minutes, yeah.
And Danny Kerr the same, but I think Alex Mitchell is, depends how England want to play, don't they? Really, and I think I think they'll stick with Alex as the first choice. And I know this is going to cause a bit of controversy, but I personally play Finn Smith in this game because I think there's an opportunity. If he's going to be an international rugby player, which I think he is for a long time, and he's going to be in and around the squad, then you are going to use him at some point in this championship. And I think that I wouldn't like to use him as an uncapped player in a game where we need to bring him on to win the game or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I think he will benefit. I mean, if we were playing Ireland or France, I'd probably say you'd start with one of the other two. But actually, I think this is a great opportunity to give the young man an introduction to international rugby. I think his game in the long term is well suited to playing at Test level. I think he's going to be he is an exceptional player. So I'd go with those two together. And as I said, that's nothing against George Ford or Marcus Smith. I think it's just the right time because it's the right game in the championship to play him.
Ben, what do you think?
I think that's really interesting from Lol, and I agree with so many of those points. One of the big discussions that you probably need to have is around the bench, and even for the forward pack, there are people that are uncapped that could well feature. Do you, as an impact player, do you have Cunningham South coming off the bench, or what's your back row makeup? But probably more so at half back. I guess if it wasn't about bringing people through with how everything's gone over the last couple of years, the big question would be: do you go for the Harlequins pairing, or do you go for Mitchell and Ford? If Finn Smith wasn't breaking onto the scene as much, and I totally get that we need to get him some game time, but I think with Farrell going, he's going to want the big voice on-field coach to sort of take over that role and just settle things a little bit. In which case, that's Marcus Smith can obviously do that job outstandingly well, but in terms of being the on-field coach in Steve Borthwick's mind, that would be George Ford. So I think if you play Kerr and Smith, you have to play the Harlequins way, and I'm not sure Steve Borthwick wants to do that. And we might all, sit at home going, yeah, but it's the best rugby. That's not what the statistics, and I hate to de-romanticize it, that's what Steve Borthwick looks at. What's the most likely chance of winning the game? And it's playing a certain game plan. You can change things up, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Danny Kerr and Marcus Smith on the bench to come on and try and impact that game. But I think he'll probably start with Mitchell and Ford.
Interesting. So centres, anyway, I think we all thought it was pretty nailed on that it would be Henry Slade outside and Ollie Lawrence inside centre. But now, obviously, we haven't got Ollie Lawrence. We haven't got Manu Tuilagi. Would you go for Fraser Dingwall, Lol, who I have to say has probably got the best nickname I've seen of recent times? M1, have you heard that one? Do you know why? because he's got two hard shoulders. I love that. That's brilliant, isn't it? Is he the
Totally.
man
Very
to
good.
play inside?
Listen, it's a really difficult. It's a problem area for all sides because it's such an important part of the game now, and it's also such an attritional position, isn't it? Trust and consistency is what you want on selection, but it's very difficult for Steve Borthwick to have that when so many players, in that position keep getting injured. Ollie Lawrence was absolutely nailed on, no doubt about that, playing brilliantly for Bath. Henry Slade is back in action and probably one of the best players in the country right now, having kind of recovered from the disappointment of being left out of the World Cup squad. So, yeah, listen, I'd probably pick Dingwall and Slade purely because they're the two form players. If you'd have asked me, 6 weeks ago, I'm not sure I'd have given you that answer. But I think his hand is kind of turned a little bit by what's happened out, with injuries, etc. And again, Ben will say, well, depending who you're picking at 9 and 10, it does factor in who you pick at 12 and 13. But having Slade's experience and his leadership in that team, I think is really important. He's been working on that with Exeter this season, and Dingwall. Why not? I think you've got to be direct against Italy. You can't be running laterally and sideways. And I think in Dingwall, you've got a guy who, maybe not as physically as robust as some of these other guys, but I tell you what, he does pick a good line. And if even more reason to play Finn Smith at 10. But there we go. I don't know. That's where I'm going. But I tend to fade out of selection meetings at this point. And I just left it to Clive Woodward. Really, he said, no, we got the 8 we need. You can crack on with the rest of it, really.
But, shall we whiz through these last 5 players? Then go on, Ben. Yeah. Are you going to go through
as Lawrence uncorks his bottle, I'll look. I have heard a couple of people in and around saying, "Oh, what about George Furbank at 12?" But as he hasn't played a huge amount there for Northampton, but he is that sort of. He's a good option for a potential 12 with his skill set. But I would. Have to agree with Lawrence. With Lawrence. Without Ollie Lawrence, I think Dingwall absolutely deserves a shot. May even have deserved his shot anyway if he was partnered with Lawrence. But I'll go with Dingwall and Slade. And then back 3. Right. This is tough again, and probably depends a bit on who you have on the bench. I'd again for that stability and with who you might pair them with and balance in the back. 3, I think I'll put Freddie Stewart at fullback. I would actually, a lot of calls for Manny Faya-Waboso to come in as the uncapped player. I'd actually go for Will Muir on one of the wings. And I'd like size and power on one wing and a bit of evasion and speed on the other. A little bit, you look at the best wing pairings and over the years, and the Ben Cohen, Jason Robinson, or George North, Shane Williams, just that different threat on either side. So I'd go Will Muir on one side, and then I'm going to go Tommy Freeman on the other. But whether if you have Freeman who can slot into the centres, you can then make room for someone like Faya-Waboso to sit on the bench and maybe come on and have a cameo.
Nice. Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. Stewart, I like. Freeman, definitely. I think he's banging form and has got a lot of versatility. So, looking forward to it. I'm going to leave you to pack your bags and head over to Rome. I shall be joining you over there for ITV's coverage of the Six Nations. We're commentating on Italy against England in Rome. So as true professionals, we like to arrive in Rome nice and early, get ourselves settled in and find a restaurant or two and a nice drop of Barolo probably. But thanks for joining us today, Benny. Really appreciate that and sharing your insights, and see you in Rome.
Ciao bella, Lorenzo.
Ciao bella.
Good.
Ragazza. Right, great stuff. Well, that's all we have for this week on the pod. My thanks, obviously, to Ben Kay and to Steve Cording. We'll be back next week with all the Six Nations news. So until then, thanks for listening and goodbye.